There is one rule on Family Feud that every contestant knows before they set foot on stage. Turn off your phone. No exceptions. No excuses. Every family is reminded 3 times before taping begins. Phones off. The show does not stop for anything. But on a Wednesday afternoon that shattered every expectation anyone had for what a game show could be, a phone rang on stage. It rang in the middle of a question. It rang loud enough for every person in the studio to hear. And instead of ignoring it, instead of telling the contestant to silence it and move on the way every host in the history of television would have done, Steve Harvey held up his hand and said 2 words that had never been spoken on the Family Feud stage before. "Stop everything." Then he looked at the contestant and said, "Answer it." The contestant answered the phone. And when Steve Harvey heard who was on the other end and why they were calling, he did something that the producers, the crew, and the 200 people in that audience will tell their grandchildren about. He shut down the entire show. Not for a break, not for a pause. He shut it down and turned Family Feud into something that nobody in that building was prepared for. If this is the kind of story that makes you feel something real, you are on the right channel. Hit subscribe and tap the bell right now. Because what happens in this video is going to stay with you. I guarantee it. Her name was Carmen Reyes. She was 44 years old and she was a home hospice nurse in San Antonio, Texas. That means she went into people's houses during the worst chapter of their lives and she sat with them while they died. She bathed people who could not bathe themselves. She administered morphine at 3 in the morning. She held the hands of men and women who had nobody else to hold their hand, and she whispered that it was okay to let go when the time came. She had been doing this work for 19 years. It had broken her heart approximately 1,000 times, and she would not have traded it for anything. Carmen grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, in a town called Edinburgh that sat close enough to the Mexican border that you could hear roosters from both countries in the morning. Her parents, Luis and Yolanda Reyes, owned a small taqueria that had been in the family since Carmen's grandfather opened it in 1962. The taqueria was called La Mesa de Abuela, grandmother's table, and it was the kind of place where the menu had not changed in 40 years because why would you fix what was already perfect? Carmen grew up in that restaurant. She learned to make tortillas before she learned to ride a bike. She cleared tables at 8 years old. She ran the register at 12, and she absorbed, through years of watching her parents feed their community with food and love and stubborn dedication, a philosophy that became the foundation of her life. You take care of people, period. You do not decide who deserves it. You do not calculate whether it is convenient. You just show up and you take care of them. Carmen became a nurse because her grandmother, the abuela the restaurant was named after, had died at home with no professional care. Carmen was 14 and she watched her grandmother die in a back bedroom while her mother tried to manage pain with over-the-counter medication and prayer. It was not peaceful. It was not dignified. It was frightening and chaotic, and it left a scar on Carmen that never fully healed. She decided that day that nobody should have to die like that. Not her family, not anyone's family. She put herself through nursing school, specialized in hospice and palliative care, and spent the next 2 decades making sure that strangers died with more dignity than her own grandmother had been given. Carmen's father, Luis, was now 76 years old. He was the reason Carmen was on the Family Feud stage, though not in the way anyone would have expected. Luis had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 8 months ago. The prognosis was terminal. The oncologist said 6 months to a year. Luis had responded to that news the way he responded to everything. He went back to the taqueria the next morning and started cooking. He said he would cook until his body told him to stop, and then he would cook one more day after that. But the cancer was aggressive. Within 4 months, Luis was too weak to stand at the grill. Within 6 months, he was in a hospital bed that Carmen had set up in the back room of the restaurant, the same room where Abuela had died 30 years earlier. Carmen had moved back to Edinburgh to care for her father. She had taken a leave from her job in San Antonio. She had brought her medical supplies, her training, and 19 years of experience caring for dying patients. But this was not a patient. This was her father, and no amount of training prepares you for that. Yolanda, Carmen's mother, ran the restaurant during the day and sat with Luis at night. Carmen handled the medical care. Her younger brother Mateo, who was 40 and worked construction in Dallas, drove down every weekend. Her sister Alina, 37, a teacher in Austin, came when she could. The family rotated around Luis the way planets rotate around a sun that is slowly going dark. Luis had one wish. He had expressed it clearly multiple times, with the stubbornness of a man who had been making the same breakfast tacos for 50 years and was not about to start being flexible now. He wanted to see his family on television. He had watched Family Feud with Yolanda every single night for 20 years. It was their show. They would sit in the restaurant after closing, eat leftover sopapillas, and yell answers at Steve Harvey. Lewis said that if he could see his family on that stage playing that game, he could go in peace. That was the phrase he used. I can go in peace. Carmen signed up the family immediately. She assembled the team, herself, Mateo, Elena, her cousin Victor, and Yolanda. She did not include Lewis because Lewis was too sick to travel. He was in that hospital bed in the back room of La Mesa de Abuela, watched over by a rotating schedule of family members and a private nurse Carmen had hired with money she could not really afford. The producers accepted the family quickly. Carmen told them about Lewis. She told them he was dying. She told them about the 20 years of watching the show together. And she told them one more thing. She asked if there was any way at all to let Lewis watch the taping live. Not a recording, live, in real time, so he could see his family on that stage while he was still alive to see it. The producers set up a video feed, a live stream from the studio to a tablet in the back room of a taqueria in Edinburgh, Texas. Lewis would be watching every second. But Carmen did something else that nobody knew about. She left her phone on, not by accident, on purpose. She told the stage manager before the taping that her father was terminally ill and that there was a real possibility that the call could come during the show. The call that every family member of a dying person dreads, the call that says it is time. The stage manager told her the policy, phones off, no exceptions. Carmen looked at him and said, "Sir, I am a hospice nurse. I know what dying looks like. My father could go at any moment. If that phone rings, I am answering it. You can disqualify me, you can throw me off the stage, but I am not going to miss my father's last moment because of a game show rule." The stage manager did not argue. He went to the head producer. The head producer went to Steve Harvey, and Steve Harvey said 4 words, "She answers the phone." Nobody told the audience. Nobody told the other family members. Only Steve and the producers knew that Carmen's phone was live, and that there was a reason it was live. And all of them were hoping it would not ring. The Reyes family took their places on the Family Feud stage. Carmen stood at the front in a bright yellow blouse that Yolanda had picked out because Lewis always said Carmen looked like sunshine in yellow. Yolanda stood beside her in a traditional Mexican embroidered dress, the same one she wore to every important occasion. Behind them were Mateo, Elena, and Victor. They were facing the O'Brien family from Boston, a group of siblings who were loud, Irish, and extremely competitive. The O'Briens had clearly been waiting their entire lives to be on this show. Steve Harvey came out. He was warmer than usual, which the audience noticed but could not explain. When he reached Carmen, he shook her hand and held it for an extra beat. "Carmen Reyes, tell me about your family." Carmen smiled. The kind of smile that looks effortless but costs everything. "Mr. Harvey, we are the Reyes family from Edinburgh, Texas. This is my mama, Yolanda, my brother Mateo, my sister Elena, and my cousin Victor. We run a taqueria called La Mesa de Abuela, and my father Lewis is watching right now from back home." Carmen looked directly into the camera. "Hi, Pappy, we are here, we made it." In a back room of a taqueria in Edinburgh, Texas, a 76-year-old man lying in a hospital bed saw his daughter's face on a tablet screen and smiled. It was the last full smile anyone would see on Lewis Reyes's face. Steve noticed Carmen's hand drift to her pocket where her phone was. He did not comment. He moved on. The game was electric. The Reyes family was good. Carmen was exceptional. She played the game the way she did everything in her life, with total focus and quiet intensity. When Steve asked for something you find in a grandmother's kitchen, Carmen said, "Love soaked into the walls." It was not on the board, but Steve stopped and looked at her and said, "That should be the #1 answer to everything." The audience laughed. Carmen laughed. And then she gave a real answer, a cast iron skillet, which was #1. Yolanda was a crowd favorite. She spoke with a thick accent, and she did not care if her English was perfect because her confidence was perfect. When Steve asked her for something a husband hides from his wife, Yolanda said, "How much he spent at the hardware store," and then looked directly into the camera and said, "Lewis, I always knew about the drill." The audience roared. In Edinburgh, the private nurse later said that Lewis laughed so hard the heart monitor spiked. But as the game progressed, Carmen's hand kept going to her pocket. Every few minutes, quick, subtle, checking, making sure the phone was still there, making sure it had not vibrated, making sure she had not missed it. Steve saw it every time. He was watching her the way he watched a contestant who he knew was carrying something heavy. And every time Carmen's hand went to her pocket, Steve's expression flickered, just for a fraction of a second. The audience did not notice, but the cameras did. The Reyes family won the game. It was not close. They dominated the final round and headed to fast money with the kind of momentum that makes for great television. During the break, Carmen stepped to the side and checked her phone. No missed calls. She closed her eyes and exhaled, not relief, just one more minute bought. One more minute of her father being alive while she was on this stage. Alina walked over and put her hand on Carmen's back. "You okay?" Carmen nodded. "He is watching." Nurse said he is smiling. That is all that matters. "We should hurry," Alina said softly, "just in case." Carmen looked at her sister. Two women who had both been trained to recognize the signs. Two women who knew that just in case was not an abstraction. It was a clock ticking in a room 1,500 miles away. Fast money. Mateo went first and scored 124 points. Solid but not spectacular. Carmen needed 76 points. A tough number. She walked to the podium. Steve looked at her. There was something different in his eyes now, something urgent. "Carmen, you need 76 points. Are you ready?" Carmen placed both hands on the podium. Her phone was in her right pocket. Her heart was in Edinburgh. "I am ready, Mr. Harvey. Let us make my pappy proud. 20 seconds. Here we go. Name something a parent never stops worrying about. Their children. Name the best meal you ever had. The last one my father cooked. Name something you would do anything to stop. Time. Name the most important words you can say to someone. I am here. Name what you want the people you love to remember about you." Carmen paused. She looked into the camera. She knew her father was watching on that tablet. She knew this might be the last thing he ever heard her say on any screen. And she said in a voice that was steady and full and aimed like an arrow at a hospital bed 1,500 miles away, that I never left their side. The buzzer sounded. The audience was still. Those answers were not game show answers. They were a daughter's final love letter to her father, delivered in real time on live television, knowing that the man receiving it was running out of moments to hear it. Steve began the reveal. His voice was careful, almost reverent. Their children for something a parent never stops worrying about. Number one answer, 43 points. The last one my father cooked for the best meal you ever had. Steve paused. Number two answer, 26 points. Time for something you would do anything to stop. Number one answer, 41 points. Carmen was already past 200 combined. She had one. I am here for the most important words. Number one answer, 38 points. For what you want the people you love to remember about you, you said, that I never left their side. Steve's voice cracked. Number one answer, 44 points. 192 points from Carmen. Combined total, 316. 4 out of 5 number one answers. An extraordinary performance from a woman who had played every second of that game with one hand on the podium and the other reaching toward a phone in her pocket. The family exploded. Yolanda grabbed Carmen. Mateo lifted Alina off the ground. Victor was shouting. For a brief, beautiful moment, the Reyes family was just a family on a game show celebrating a win. And then the phone rang. The sound cut through the celebration like a blade, a ringtone coming from Carmen's pocket, not loud. But in the sudden stillness that followed the celebration, it was the loudest sound in the building. Carmen's face changed instantly. The joy vanished. Something ancient and clinical and deeply trained took its place. She was not a game show contestant anymore. She was a hospice nurse, and she knew what that ringtone meant. She pulled the phone from her pocket. She looked at the screen. Her face told the story before she said a word. Her eyes went wide. Her lips pressed together. Her hand began to shake. The audience murmured. Phones were not supposed to ring on set. This was a violation. Someone should say something. But nobody said anything because something about the way Carmen was holding that phone made every person in the room understand that this was not a mistake. This was the moment. Carmen looked at Steve. Her eyes were pleading, not for permission, for understanding. Steve Harvey did not hesitate. He held up his hand to the audience, to the cameras, to every single person in that building. "Stop everything," he said. His voice was absolute. No room for discussion. No room for protocol. "Carmen, answer the phone." Carmen answered. "Hello." The audience could not hear the other end of the call, but they could see Carmen's face, and Carmen's face told them everything. "How long?" Carmen said. Her voice was steady, professional, the hospice nurse voice, the voice she used when a family was about to receive the worst news of their lives. "Is he conscious? Can he hear me?" A pause. Whatever the answer was, it made Carmen close her eyes and press her free hand to her chest. "Put the phone by his ear, please." Right now, the studio was silent. 200 people watching a woman on a game show stage talking to her dying father 1,500 miles away through a phone pressed against a pillow in the back room of a taqueria. Carmen spoke, and what she said was not for the audience. It was not for the cameras. It was not for Steve Harvey or the producers or anyone else. It was for Louis. "Pappy, it is Carmen. I am right here. I know you can hear me. Pappy, we won. We won the game. You saw it right. You saw us on the television. You saw Mama give that answer about the hardware store." She laughed through her tears, a broken, beautiful laugh. "Pappy, I am wearing the yellow. You always liked me in yellow." Her voice dropped to a whisper. Pappy, I need you to know something. You taught me how to take care of people. Every patient I ever sat with, every hand I ever held, I was doing what you taught me. You and Mama and Abuela, you showed me that taking care of people is not a job. It is who we are. Pappy, you do not have to be scared. I am right here. I am not leaving your side. Even from here, I am not leaving. Yolanda had collapsed into Mateo's arms. She understood what was happening. Alina had her hand over her mouth. Victor was crying with his eyes closed. Carmen kept talking. Papi, La Mesa de Abuela is going to be fine. Mama is strong. You know how strong she is. You married the strongest woman in Texas. Another broken laugh. And Papi, the tortillas are not going to change. I will make sure of that. They are never going to change. She pressed the phone tighter against her ear. She was listening. The audience could not hear what was being said on the other end, but Carmen nodded once, twice. Her face softened into something that was beyond grief. It was the face of a woman who had sat with dying people for 19 years and who knew with the certainty of long practice what was happening. It is okay, Pappy, Carmen whispered. You can go. Abuela is waiting for you. She has your table ready. You can go, Pappy. We are okay. We are all okay. Silence. Carmen stood there for a long moment, the phone still against her ear, her eyes closed, her body still. Then she lowered the phone slowly, looked at the screen, and pressed it against her heart. She looked at Steve Harvey. 2 tears rolled down her cheeks, and she said in a voice so calm it was almost peaceful, "He is gone." The studio did not make a sound, not a whisper, not a cough, not a rustle. 200 people held their breath because they had just witnessed something that had never happened on a game show or on any other kind of television. A daughter had said goodbye to her father live on camera, standing on the Family Feud stage, and the last thing her father heard was his daughter's voice telling him it was okay to go. Steve Harvey walked away from his podium. He walked directly to Carmen. He did not say anything. He just opened his arms. And Carmen, the woman who had spent 19 years being strong for everyone else's dying, leaned into Steve Harvey and let herself be held. And for the first time since her father's diagnosis, she stopped being the nurse and she became the daughter. She sobbed into Steve Harvey's shoulder with the full weight of a grief she had been delaying for 8 months. Yolanda walked to them. She put her arms around both Carmen and Steve, then Mateo, then Alina, then Victor. The entire Reyes family surrounded Carmen in a cocoon of love while the audience watched in stunned, reverent silence. Steve finally spoke. His voice was barely audible. "Miss Carmen, I have been on this stage a long time. I have never stopped a show, not once. But when that phone rang, I knew exactly what that call was, and there is no game, no show, no rule on this earth that is more important than a daughter saying goodbye to her father." He held Carmen at arm's length and looked at her. "Your father watched you win. He saw his family on television. He heard your voice, and he went in peace. You gave him that on this stage with the whole world watching. You gave him exactly what he wanted." Carmen wiped her eyes. "He wanted to see us play. That is all he ever asked for. And he did. He saw you play and he saw you win. And the last thing he heard was his daughter telling him the tortillas are never going to change." Steve's voice broke into something between a laugh and a cry. "Miss Carmen, that is the most beautiful goodbye I have ever witnessed." The audience, which had been silent for nearly 5 minutes, finally exhaled. And the sound that followed was not applause, it was something else. It was the collective release of 200 people who had just been part of something sacred. They stood slowly, not in celebration, but in honor. They stood the way you stand at a funeral, with weight, with respect. With the understanding that they had been allowed to witness a private moment that was also, somehow, the most public moment any of them had ever experienced. Steve did not resume the show. He could have. The taping had reached its natural conclusion. The fast money round was complete. The $20,000 was won. By every measure of television production, the segment was finished. But Steve Harvey made a decision in that moment that the producers later said was one of the most significant choices in the history of the franchise. He kept the cameras rolling, and he turned Family Feud into something else entirely. Steve turned to the camera and spoke directly to the audience at home. "What you are about to see was not planned. It was not scripted. Carmen Reyes' father, Louis, passed away moments ago while watching his family play this game. He was 76 years old. He ran a taqueria in Edinburgh, Texas for over 50 years, and his last wish was to see his family on this stage. Carmen made that wish come true, and now I want to make something true for Carmen." Steve turned to Carmen. "Tell me about your father's restaurant." Carmen wiped her face and straightened her yellow blouse. The nurse was back. The composure was back. Because Carmen Reyes was a woman who took care of people, and right now, taking care of people meant honoring her father's life in front of the world. La Mesa de Abuela, grandmother's table. My grandfather opened it in 1962. My father took it over in 1980. My mother has been running it for the past 8 months while my father has been sick. It is a small place, maybe 30 seats, but every seat has had 1,000 people sit in it. She smiled through her tears. The menu has not changed in 40 years. My father said that good food does not need to be reinvented. It just needs to be made with love every single time. What is going to happen to the restaurant now? Carmen looked at Yolanda. Yolanda straightened her embroidered dress and spoke. Her accent was thick and her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. La Mesa is going to stay open. Louis and I built it together. We built it with our hands. I am 73 years old and my hands still work. I'm going to cook until I cannot cook anymore, because that restaurant is not just food. It is Louis. Every recipe is his heart on a plate, and as long as I am alive, his heart keeps cooking. The audience cheered. Steve let them. Then he got quiet again. Carmen, your father spent 50 years feeding his community. You spent 19 years taking care of dying people. Your mother is standing on this stage on the worst day of her life talking about keeping her husband's dream alive. The Reyes family does not stop taking care of people. Not ever, not even today. Steve pulled out an envelope. Carmen, the $20,000 you won is yours, but after I heard your story, I made some calls. In this envelope is a commitment from a restaurant association in Texas to fully renovate La Mesa de Abuela. New equipment, new kitchen. Whatever your mama needs to keep cooking for the next 20 years, it is taken care of. Yolanda gasped. She grabbed Carmen's arm. Mija, the ovens, they are going to fix the ovens. Yolanda had been cooking on equipment that was older than some of her grandchildren. The stove had 2 burners that did not work. The walk-in cooler had been held together with duct tape and faith. Brand new ovens, Miss Yolanda, Steve said. Brand new everything. Then Steve did one more thing. He turned to the camera one last time. I want every person watching this to hear me. Carmen's father died watching this show. He died hearing his daughter's voice. And the last thing he saw on that screen was his family winning. If that is not proof that family is the most powerful force on earth, I do not know what is. Louis Reyes, rest in peace, sir. Your table is set. Your family is taken care of, and your tortillas are never going to change. Carmen pressed the phone against her heart one more time. Thank you, Pappy, she whispered. Thank you for watching. The taping ended, not with the usual fanfare, not with the music and the confetti and the cheering. It ended with silence. The kind of silence that falls over a room when every person in it understands that they have been part of something bigger than entertainment, something that would stay in their bones for the rest of their lives. When the episode aired, it became one of the most talked-about television events of the decade. The clip of Carmen answering the phone was viewed over 200 million times, but it was the audio of Carmen saying goodbye to Louis that traveled farthest. That audio was shared in hospice training centers, nursing schools, and palliative care conferences around the world. Experts called it one of the most genuine and compassionate examples of end-of-life communication ever captured on any medium. But it was Carmen's line about the tortillas that became the cultural touchstone. The tortillas are never going to change. People printed it on shirts. Restaurants put it on their walls. Families used it as shorthand for everything permanent in a world that would not stop changing. It meant the things that matter will survive. The love behind the recipe outlasts the person who made it. What your family built together does not die when one person leaves. The tortillas are never going to change. Louis Reyes' funeral in Edinburgh drew over 1,000 people. The line stretched out the door of the church and down the block. People drove from across Texas. Some flew from other states. The taqueria provided the food because that is what Louis would have wanted. Yolanda and a team of volunteers cooked for 14 straight hours to feed everyone who came. They made Louis's recipes, every single one, exactly the way he made them, because the tortillas were never going to change. Carmen spoke at the funeral. She wore the yellow blouse. She stood in front of 1,000 people and told them about the moment on the Family Feud stage when her phone rang and she knew. My father's last wish was to see his family on television. God gave him that. And then God called him home while I was standing on that stage in the yellow blouse he loved, with the mother he married and the children he raised and the cousin who grew up in his kitchen. He died surrounded by us, not physically, but in every way that mattered. He could hear me, he could see me, and I told him the tortillas were never going to change, and he went in peace. I'm a hospice nurse. I have helped hundreds of people cross over, but I have never seen anyone leave this world as peacefully as my father because he had everything he needed. He had his family, and he had his show. The renovation of La Mesa de Abuela was completed 3 months after Louis's death. The Restaurant Association brought in a full team and transformed the kitchen. New ovens, new coolers, new counters, a proper ventilation system for the first time in the restaurant's history. They kept the dining room exactly the same because Carmen insisted. The tables were the same. The chairs were the same. The menu on the wall, handwritten by Louis in 1980, was preserved behind glass. On reopening day, a line stretched around the block. People who had seen the episode came from everywhere to eat at the restaurant they had watched a man die listening to. The local news covered it. National outlets picked it up. Food writers drove down to Edinburgh and wrote about Yolanda's cooking with the kind of reverence usually reserved for restaurants that charged 10 times what La Mesa charged. But the most important thing that happened on reopening day was small and quiet. At the table in the back, the table closest to the room where Louis had died, Yolanda set a place. A plate, a fork, a napkin, and a glass of horchata, Louis's favorite. She said it every day from that point forward, every single day. A plate for Louis, because at grandmother's table everyone had a seat, even the people who were no longer there. Steve Harvey visited the restaurant 4 months after the episode. He sat at that back table next to Louis's empty place setting and ate every item on the menu. Afterward, he sat with Carmen and Yolanda in the kitchen and had a conversation that would air as a special on his show. "Carmen, how are you doing?" Carmen thought about it. "I am doing what my father taught me to do. I am showing up. I went back to work last month. I am sitting with my patients again, holding hands, administering medicine at 3 in the morning. And now I do something I did not do before. When a patient is scared, I tell them about my father. I tell them that he died listening to his daughter's voice on a game show and that the last thing he heard was that the food he loved was going to keep being made. And I tell them that dying does not have to be the worst thing. It can be peaceful. It can even be beautiful if the people you love are there." Steve nodded. "And the restaurant?" Yolanda answered. "The restaurant is full every day. People come from everywhere. They sit in Louis's chairs and they eat Louis's food and they leave happy. That is what he wanted. He wanted people to leave happy. Miss Yolanda, I ate your enchiladas today. If Louis made those, I understand why people drive 3 hours for them." Yolanda smiled. "Louis taught me the recipe. I taught our daughter. Our daughter will teach her daughters. The recipe does not die. It just keeps passing." Steve looked at the camera. "I have eaten at some of the finest restaurants in the world. I'm telling you right now, nobody makes enchiladas like Miss Yolanda Reyes. And the reason is not the sauce or the cheese or the technique. The reason is love. 50 years of love rolled into a tortilla and served on a plate. That is something you cannot buy and you cannot fake and you cannot lose, even when the person who started it is gone." 2 years after the episode, Carmen published an essay called The Phone Call. It described the moment her phone rang on the Family Feud stage, what she felt, what she said, and what it taught her about the intersection of life and death and love and television. The essay was published in a major nursing journal and was later included in an anthology about end-of-life care that became required reading in hospice training programs across the country. In the essay, Carmen wrote something that became her most quoted passage. "People ask me if I wish my father had died differently. If I wish I had been by his bedside instead of on a game show stage. And I tell them no. My father spent 50 years behind a counter, feeding people, making them happy, never asking for anything in return. He deserved to go out watching his family shine. He deserved one last perfect meal of joy, and that is what we gave him. 5 questions, 5 answers, and a daughter in a yellow blouse telling him the tortillas are never going to change. That was his last meal. And it was the best one I ever served." La Mesa de Abuela was still open 5 years later. Yolanda, now 78, was still cooking every morning. Carmen had returned to Edinburgh permanently and had taken over managing the restaurant while maintaining her nursing practice part-time. The taqueria had expanded slightly, adding an outdoor patio that Carmen had named Louis's Table. The patio had 12 seats, and it was first come, first served. And on any given evening, you could find a mix of locals, tourists, and people who had driven hours because they had seen a Family Feud clip and needed to taste the food that a man's daughter promised would never change. The phone Carmen had answered on that stage was preserved in a shadow box on the wall of the restaurant, next to the menu Louis had handwritten in 1980, and a photograph of the Reyes family on the Family Feud stage. Underneath the phone, a small placard read, "The call that stopped the show, the love that never stopped." And every night after the last customer left and the kitchen was cleaned and the chairs were put up on the tables, Yolanda walked to the back table and touched Louis's place setting. She straightened the fork. She adjusted the napkin. And she whispered, as she had every night for years, "Buenas noches, mi amor. Your table is ready. The tortillas are the same." If this story left a mark on you, I need you to carry it forward. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with every person you love. Share it with your parents, share it with your children, share it with the people you have not called in too long. Because the truth this story teaches is simple and it is urgent. Do not wait. Call them now. Tell them now. Say the words now, because you do not know when the phone is going to ring. Drop a comment and tell me, what is the one thing you would say to someone you love if you knew they were listening right now? I read every comment, And I promise you every single one matters. Until next time, keep your table set, keep your people close. And remember, the tortillas never change. God bless.